Hey guys, Jordan here. In this video, I'm going to talk about 3 things you must get right with real estate photography. All right, so the first thing you must get right with real estate photography is composition. And this is probably 1, 2, and 3. You know, honestly, composition is so important. You can have the best lighting, but if what you're capturing doesn't show the buyer or tell the right story at a property, I think, you know, you're doing yourself a disservice. You could edit, you could spend all the time in the world, but you know, it's important to invest in an ultra wide lens if you're brand new to real estate photography and focus on the composition. You know, what you're actually capturing. Are your front shots capturing too much of the neighboring properties? Are you focused on what it is? Are you too close to the property to where it's stretching out the roof of the property? Is it better to scoot back and zoom in? You know, these are all the things that you're gonna have to consider when shooting real estate photography. And the same thing on the inside. Tripod height in the kitchen. Should you show underneath cabinets? Should you show the tops of countertops? You know, it honestly is kind of a balancing act, and you know, these are all different variables and there's no right or wrong answer, but you got to get a good feel of what style of photography you're going to be delivering to your customers. And I think a great way to start is to look at professional photography for real estate on Zillow or other platforms and kind of look at properties and see, you know, what are those photos that I like? You know, what are those compositions? What do they look like? And then just try to reverse engineer and put those processes and compositions in your mind, so when you're looking through the camera, you can capture similar angles. All right, so the second thing you must get right with real estate photography is your camera settings. Now, there is no right and wrong camera settings. You really need to know the capabilities of your camera and the lens that you're using. What's the look and feel that you're looking for? I would say in general, higher ISO settings typically don't produce the best results with real estate photography. You usually want to keep your ISO settings pretty low, and there's kind of a range with aperture, but I'm not going to say it because you can just test your lens. You know, what type of results are you getting on this end or this end? You know, you kind of gotta know how your equipment performs. But yes, making sure that you have correct camera settings and file type. You know, I think this is probably one you might turn on your camera and be shooting JPEGs. Now, JPEGs are really tough to edit with real estate photography, and I really recommend shooting RAW because there are times when white balance isn't correct, and just making your image bluer or more yellow isn't gonna give you the best results. You know, shooting RAW will give you that ability to adjust the native white balance of the image during the editing process. So little settings like this are very important. Just make sure that your ISO settings aren't going crazy high, and that you're shooting the correct file type. And obviously everything, you know, if you really want to shoot JPEG, you can, but you're gonna have to make sure that you're getting the correct shots in camera, your white balance is correct and everything. All right, and the third thing you got to get right with real estate photography is your exposure and or your lighting. So some of you may be shooting with external flash, some might just be HDR and camera only, but I think it's really important to make sure that your exposure, your picture is exposed correctly. Now, if you're shooting bracketed images where, you know, a sequence of 0, -3, or +3, or whatever ranges you're using, maybe you're shooting 5 images, but make sure that center shot, that 0 image, looks good in camera. So depending on the light metering of your camera, it might be focusing too much outside on the windows, creating a really dark exposure on the inside. Make sure, you know, if you had to choose like how the image looks, focus on the interior and make sure that 0 looks good and that you're adjusting your exposure accordingly. Because if it's shooting all dark, you're not gonna have a whole lot of details in the shadows. Or if it's shooting all bright, even at that -3, you might not be capturing a whole lot of details in the highlights. So that's why it's important to get a good range and make sure that 0 is an appropriate exposure. All right, guys, so those are 3 things you must get right with real estate photography. Now, if you got value out of this video, make sure to hit that like button and consider subscribing to our channel as we consistently put out content just like this. If you're interested in learning more about the real estate photography business, you can check out my free workshop. The link is in the description below. That's gonna do it for this one. Reach out if you have any questions. We will see you guys on the next one.